Louisiana Department of Wildlife and Fisheries. Field report hashtag LA 2024-1127. Submitted by Thayer Boudreau, Senior Wetlands Ecologist. Date, November 27th, 2024. Location, Atchafalaya Basin, Iberville Parish. I've been working these waters for 12 years. I know every cypress root, every gator hole, every seasonal shift in the basin's chemistry. What I found yesterday doesn't belong in any textbook. The call came from the Henderson office around 0600 hours. 3 separate fishing guides reported massive fish kills along the eastern channels. Not just catfish and gar, but everything. Crawfish floating belly up in perfect spirals. Even the turtles were dead, which should have been my first warning. I took the department boat out at dawn, expecting the usual suspects. Agricultural runoff, maybe an illegal chemical dump. The GPS led me deep into the basin where the water turns black and the canopy blocks most of the sky. That's where I found them. The dead fish weren't just floating. They were arranged. Hundreds of bass, bluegill, and gar positioned in geometric patterns across the water surface. Perfect 5-pointed stars stretching 20 feet across. Each fish had identical wounds. 5 small punctures forming the same star pattern on their flanks. I collected samples, documented everything with my camera. The water itself looked wrong, too clear for November, with an oily shimmer that didn't match any pollution I'd seen. When I dipped the pH strips, the color that came back wasn't on the chart. Not acidic, not basic. Something else entirely. But it was the algae that made me call my supervisor. Bioluminescent blooms don't happen in Louisiana freshwater. They belong in tropical oceans, not cypress swamps. Yet there it was, electric blue threads weaving through the water like veins of light. When I disturbed the surface with my paddle, the glow pulsed, almost like it was responding. I filled 6 sample containers and headed back to the lab. The drive to Baton Rouge usually takes an hour. I made it in 40 minutes, checking my rearview mirror the whole way. Couldn't shake the feeling something was following me, even though the road stayed empty. The preliminary analysis came back this morning. Dr. Mellinson from University Lab called personally, which never happens. His voice was tight, professional, but I caught the tremor underneath. Thayer, these proteins, they're not in any database. The molecular structure is unlike anything we've cataloged. And the bioluminescent compounds, they're producing energy signatures that shouldn't be possible with Earth-based chemistry. I asked him to run the tests again. He already had. 3 times. There's something else, he said. The dead tissue samples? They're not decaying. At all. After 48 hours, there's no bacterial breakdown, no cellular decomposition. It's like they're preserved by whatever killed them. I'm heading back to the basin tomorrow with a full sampling kit and underwater cameras. My brother Merrick runs fishing charters out of Henderson. He knows those waters better than anyone. If something's spreading through the ecosystem, he'll have seen the signs. The water samples are sitting in the lab refrigerator right now, still glowing that impossible blue. In the dark, they pulse like tiny hearts. I keep thinking about those star patterns. 5 points, perfect symmetry, repeated across miles of swamp. Fish don't arrange themselves like that when they die. Something put them there, something that understands geometry. End report. Personal note, Merrick called while I was typing this. Says the old Cajun fishermen won't go out anymore. They're calling it eau de mort, dead water. Claims they heard singing from the empty channels last night. Singing in no language they recognized. I told them I'd be down in the morning. Didn't mention the samples are still glowing. The stars on those fish, they remind me of something from Grandmere stories. About things that swim between worlds, things that wait in dark water for the right alignment. Used to think they were just tales to keep children from wandering into the bayou alone. Maybe Grandmere knew more than we thought. Report filed, classification pending. Louisiana Department of Wildlife and Fisheries. Field report hashtag LA 2024-1128. Submitted by Thayer Boudreau, Senior Wetlands Ecologist. Date, November 28th, 2024. Location, Henderson, Louisiana. Boudreaux charter dock. The call came at 3:17 a.m. I know because I was still awake, staring at the lab photos on my laptop. Those star patterns burned into my retinas every time I closed my eyes. Thayer. Marek's voice was hoarse, like he'd been shouting. You need to get down here. Now, what's wrong? The swamp is talking. I've known my brother for 34 years. Marek doesn't spook easy. He's pulled drowning men from cottonmouth nests, weathered hurricanes that sent others running inland. But his voice shook like a child's. Talking how? Just get down here. Bring your recording equipment. I drove through the night, Louisiana's empty highways stretching like black water under my headlights. The radio crackled with static between stations, picking up fragments of what sounded like singing. Distant voices and languages that made my teeth ache. Dawn was breaking when I reached Henderson. The charter dock sat empty except for Marek's boat. No other fishermen, no tourists. The parking lot that's usually packed by sunrise held only my truck and Marek's rusted Silverado. I found him sitting on the dock, staring at the water. His tackle box lay open beside him, but the hooks and lures were arranged in patterns. 5-pointed stars, just like the dead fish. When did you start doing that? I asked, pointing to the patterns. Marek looked down at his hands like he'd never seen them before. I don't remember. We're just sitting here listening and... He scattered the tackle with a violent sweep of his arm. They've been calling all night, Thayer. The voices. Show me. We took his boat out into the basin. The water looked different in daylight, clearer than it should be, with that same oily shimmer I'd documented yesterday. But now I could see deeper. Shapes move in the depths, too large and too regular to be logs or debris. There, Marek whispered, cutting the engine. You hear it. At first, only the usual swamp sounds. Insects, water lapping against cypress roots, the distant splash of something surfacing. Then, underneath it all, another sound. A low humming that seemed to come from the water itself. I activated my digital recorder, but the playback showed only static. Whatever was making that sound didn't register on human equipment. Boudreaux went missing 2 nights ago, Marek said, not taking his eyes off the water. Old Louis. Been fishing these waters for 60 years. Found his boat yesterday, anchored in the middle of Bloody Bayou. Engine still running, tackle box open. No sign of Louis. Gator maybe? Gators don't eat the boat's seat. Thayer. Something chewed through the vinyl in those same star patterns. 5 holes. Neat as you please. We drifted deeper into the basin. The humming grew stronger, joining with other sounds, clicking like massive insects, and something that might have been laughter if it came from human throats. 3 more boats found empty this morning, Marek continued. All the same, engines running, star patterns chewed into everything. But no blood, no signs of struggle. Like the men just walked into the water. I thought about the lab results, the impossible proteins, the fish that wouldn't decay. Marek, I need you to stop taking charters. Close the business for a week. Can't do that. This is feeding season. Listen to me. I grab his arm. Something's wrong with the water. Chemically wrong. The fish kills, the missing fisherman, it's all connected. I'm waiting on more test results. But until then, the humming stopped. Complete silence settled over the swamp. No insects, no bird calls, no water sounds. Even the breeze died. The only noise was our breathing and the soft flap of water against the boat hull. Then we heard the singing. It rose from the depths like a choir of drowned voices, harmonizing in frequencies that made my bones vibrate. The water around us began to glow, that same electric blue from the algae samples. Threads of light wove through the murky depths, pulsing in rhythm with the impossible song. Jesus Christ, Marek breathed. Jesus Christ, Thayer, what is that? The singing grew louder, more complex. I could make out individual voices now, dozens of them, maybe hundreds. Some sounded almost human, others definitely didn't. Something large moved beneath us. The boat rocked as it passed, and I caught a glimpse of pale flesh and too many limbs undulating through the glowing water. Start the engine, I said quietly. What? Start the fucking engine, Merrick. He yanked the cord. The motor coughed, sputtered, died. The singing was getting closer now, rising toward the surface. The water around us churned with phosphorescent wake trails. Second pull. Third. On the fourth try, the engine caught. Merrick gunned it, sending us racing toward the dock as the singing reached a crescendo behind us. I looked back once. The entire channel glowed like a fallen constellation, and shapes broke the surface in our wake. Pale, glistening forms that watched us flee with eyes like black stars. Back at the dock, we sat in silence for 20 minutes. The normal sounds of the swamp gradually returned. Insects, birds, the distant hum of highway traffic. But underneath it all, if I listened carefully, I could still hear them singing. Marek's hand shook as he tied off the boat. What are we going to do? I thought about the lab results, the impossible chemistry, the fish arranged in stellar patterns. I'm making some calls. There are people who study this kind of thing. What kind of thing? I stared at the water where bioluminescent threads still flickered in the depths. The kind that shouldn't exist. End report. Personal note. Found Dr. Exilium Vance's number in the LDWF emergency contacts. Environmental anomalies specialist based out of New Orleans. Left 3 voicemails. Marek's staying at my place tonight. Won't go back to his house near the water. Can't blame him. The singing hasn't stopped. Even here, 15 miles from the basin, I can hear it if I listen carefully. It's in the pipes, the electrical hum, the spaces between radio stations. Grandmere used to say the old spirits sleep in deep water, waiting for the right song to wake them. Said they'd rise when the stars came down to swim. I'm starting to think she wasn't speaking metaphorically. Report filed. Classification urgent. Louisiana Department of Wildlife and Fisheries. Field report hashtag LA 2024-1129. Submitted by Thayer Boudreau, Senior Wetlands Ecologist. Date, November 29th, 2024. Location, undisclosed research station, Atchafalaya Basin. Dr. Exilium Vance returned my calls at 0630 hours. His voice carried the clipped authority of federal oversight, but underneath, I caught something else. Relief, maybe, or recognition. Mr. Boudreau, I've reviewed your preliminary reports. I'm driving down from New Orleans this morning. Meet me at coordinates 30.2672 degrees north, 91.4968 degrees west at 1,400 hours. Come alone. Those coordinates weren't on any of my survey maps. Deep basin, accessible only by boat through channels most fishermen avoid. When I asked how he knew those waters, the line went quiet for 10 seconds. We've been monitoring the area for some time, he said finally. Bring your water samples. I left Merrick at my house with strict instructions not to go near the water. He was arranging breakfast items on the kitchen table, bacon strips in perfect 5-pointed stars, eggs clustered in geometric patterns. When I pointed it out, he stared at his hands like they belonged to someone else. It just feels right, he said, like I'm remembering something I never learned. The coordinates led me to a channel I'd never seen on official surveys. Hidden behind a curtain of Spanish moss and cypress roots, narrow enough that my boat scraped the banks. The water here was completely clear, so transparent I could see the bottom 15 feet down. And moving across that bottom, pale shapes that looked almost human if you didn't look too closely. The research station sat on stilts in a small clearing, camouflaged by military-grade netting. Solar panels and satellite dishes were disguised as dead branches. If you didn't know it was there, you drift right past. Dr. Vance met me at the dock. Mid-40s, lean build, expensive outdoor gear that looked like it had actually been used. His handshake was firm, but his eyes kept flicking to the water. How long have you been here? I asked. 3 years. Officially, we're studying invasive species migration patterns. Unofficially, he gestured toward the station. We're documenting something that doesn't belong in any taxonomy. The interior looked like a cross between a marine biology lab and a military command center. Tanks filled with that impossible blue algae lined one wall, their contents pulsing with rhythmic light. Monitors displayed sonar readings, water chemistry analyses, and what looked like audio waveform patterns. "Show me your samples," Vance said. I handed over the containers for my initial collection. In the station's UV lighting, they glowed brighter, the bioluminescent threads weaving complex patterns against the glass. Vance nodded grimly. "Classic presentation. We've been tracking similar outbreaks for 18 months. Always the same progression. Anomalous chemistry, organized fish kills, then the disappearances start." Disappearances? He pulled up files on his computer. Missing persons reports from across Louisiana, Mississippi, Alabama. Fishermen, hunters, anyone who spent time near deep water. All within the last 2 years. All unsolved. They take people with specific knowledge, Vance explained. Local guides, marine biologists, anyone who understands aquatic ecosystems. The pattern suggests they're learning, adapting. Instead of answering, he led me to another tank. This one was larger, filled with murky water that seemed to move on its own. At first I thought it was empty. Then something shifted in the depths, and I saw them. Pale, translucent forms the size of house cats, with too many limbs and skin that rippled like disturbed water. Their faces were almost human, but the features kept shifting, rearranging themselves as I watched. When they sensed my presence, they pressed against the glass, leaving star-shaped prints with what might have been hands. "Juveniles," Vance said. "We captured these 3 months ago. They are growing, changing, learning to mimic human forms." One of the creatures opened what I initially thought was a mouth. Instead of teeth, it revealed rows of bioluminescent tendrils that pulsed in the same pattern as the algae samples. The sound that emerged wasn't quite singing, wasn't quite speech, but it made my bones ache with familiarity. "That's the calling frequency," Vance continued. "They use it to coordinate, to communicate across vast distances, and lately, to influence human behavior." I thought about Merrick arranging his tackle, his breakfast, everything in those star patterns. Influence how? Subliminal suggestion. Gradual behavioral modification. We've documented cases where exposure leads to compulsive pattern making, sleep disruption, and eventually, he gestured toward a wall of missing person photos. Complete neural integration. Integration? They take willing subjects, Mr. Boudreau. People who've been exposed long enough don't resist when a call comes. They walk into the water voluntarily. The implications hit me like cold bayou mud. My brother. He's been fishing these waters for 20 years. How long has he been exhibiting pattern behavior? 2 days. Maybe 3. Vance's face tightened. Then we still have time. The integration process takes weeks of sustained exposure. But we need to act fast. He pulled up another file. Project Tidecrawler, classification level 7. Satellite images showed similar outbreaks across the Gulf Coast, each one marked with timestamps and casualty reports. "This isn't random," I said, studying the progression. "No, they're following specific waterways, targeting strategic locations, deep channels that connect to major river systems. If they reach the Mississippi," he didn't need to finish. "The Mississippi touched half the continent. What are they exactly?" Vance was quiet for a long moment, watching the juveniles pulse against their tank walls. "The working theory is extraterrestrial, something that arrived in deep ocean trenches decades ago, maybe longer. They've been dormant, adapting, learning about our ecosystem. Recent seismic activity may have triggered their expansion phase." Recent seismic activity? Deep water drilling, oil exploration. We've been punching holes in the ocean floor for years, never considering what might be down there. We might wake up. The juveniles began singing again, their harmonies creating complex interference patterns in the water. On the monitors, similar songs appeared from dozens of locations across the basin. "They're calling to something," I realized. "The adults. We estimate specimens up to 30 feet in length, fully amphibious, capable of coordinated pack hunting. They've been moving closer to populated areas each month. Through the station windows, I could see the water beginning to glow. Not just threads now, but entire sections of the channel pulsing with bioluminescent activity. "Mr. Boudreau," Vance said quietly, "I need to ask you something, and I need complete honesty. Have you experienced any compulsive behaviors since your first exposure? Pattern making, arrangement of objects, unusual dreams." I thought about my drive here, how I'd unconsciously taken the back roads, following a route that seemed to suggest itself. How I'd parked my boat in a specific spot without conscious decision. How natural it had felt to trust coordinates from a stranger. "Maybe," I admitted, "we need to get you and your brother into protective isolation. There's a facility in Baton Rouge with electromagnetic shielding. It disrupts their influence frequencies." The singing outside grew louder, joined by voices from deeper in the swamp. The juveniles pressed harder against their tank, star-shaped prints covering the glass like desperate handprints. "How long have you been watching this?" I asked. "Long enough to know we're losing. This station, the research, it's all containment protocol. We're documenting the spread, not stopping it." "What?" Vance met my eyes, and I saw the weight of terrible knowledge there. "Because we caused it, Mr. Boudreau. Project Tidecrawler wasn't just observation. It was activation. We woke them up." End report. Personal note. Left the station at 1800 hours. Vance gave me encrypted communication equipment and emergency protocols. Says there are other stations, other researchers, but the project is compartmentalized. Most don't know the full scope. Called Merrick. No answer. Drove straight to my house. Found him in the backyard, standing waist-deep in the retention pond behind my property. He was singing along with voices I couldn't hear, arranging lily pads in stellar configurations. He smiled when he saw me. "They're so beautiful, Thayer. Why didn't you tell me they were so beautiful?" Getting him inside took 3 hours of careful coaxing. He's sleeping now, but his dreams are filled with harmonies and languages that predate human speech. The water in my taps tastes different tonight. Saline, like it's remembering the ocean. Report filed. Classification. Project Tidecrawler. Louisiana Department of Wildlife and Fisheries. Emergency report #LA 2024-1130. Submitted by Thayer Boudreau, Senior Wetlands Ecologist. Date: November 30th, 2024. Location: multiple incident sites at Atchafalaya Basin. Merrick woke me at 0430 hours, shaking me with hands that felt like ice water. "They're coming up," he whispered. "All of them. They're coming up tonight." I found in my kitchen window, watching the retention pond. The water glowed with that familiar electric blue, and shapes moved beneath the surface, larger than the juveniles I'd seen at Vance's station. Much larger. "How do you know?" "I can hear them planning." His voice was distant, dreamy. "Such beautiful plans, Thayer. They're going to show us worlds we've never imagined." My encrypted radio crackled. Vance's voice, tense and urgent. "All units, we have multiple emergency events across the basin. This is not a drill. Repeat, this is not a drill." I grabbed my field kit and dragged Merrick to the truck. He didn't resist, just kept humming along with frequencies I couldn't hear. As we drove toward Henderson, I could see lights beneath every body of water we passed. Drainage ditches, roadside ponds, even puddles from last night's rain, all glowing with that impossible luminescence. The first call came from Lennox Thibodeau, the old trapper who'd been working these waters since before I was born. His voice was barely a whisper through the radio static. "Something took my boat," he said. "Took it clean out of the water. I was checking my trap lines when it just lifted. 20-foot aluminum hull, lifted straight up by something underneath." "Where are you now, Lennox?" "Cypress Grove Marina. What's left of it." The marina sat on the main channel into the basin. When we arrived, I understood why Lennox sounded broken. The dock had been shredded, not broken or collapsed, but methodically torn apart in those same 5-pointed patterns. Planks arranged in stellar configurations across the water surface. Boats overturned and dragged into precise geometric formations. Lennox sat on the boat ramp, staring at the destruction. His weathered face had gone pale gray. "Been trapping these waters 40 years, he said without looking up. "Seen gators take full-grown men, watched hurricanes turn cypress trees into matchsticks. But this, he gestured weakly at the marina. This ain't natural predation. This is something thinking. I activated my camera, documenting the systematic destruction. Every piece of debris had been placed with purpose. Boat hulls formed a massive star pattern visible from the air. Dock planks spelled out symbols that hurt to look at directly. How many boats? I asked. 16. All lifted clean out of the water and arranged like offerings. Merrick wandered toward the water's edge, still humming. The sound harmonized perfectly with vibrations coming from beneath the surface. As he got closer, the water began to glow brighter, and I could see shapes rising toward him. Merrick, get back. But he was already ankle deep, then knee deep, walking into the channel with the calm certainty of someone following a familiar path. The creatures rose to meet him, pale, undulating forms the size of grown men, with too many limbs and faces that shifted like disturbed water. I tackled him before he could go deeper, dragging him back to the ramp as the Starspawn surfaced around us. Their singing filled the air, complex harmonies that made my teeth ache and my vision blur. Up close, I could see they weren't entirely aquatic. Gills fluttered along their necks, but they also had primitive lungs, webbed appendages that could function as hands or fins. They were designed for both environments. Beautiful, Merrick gasped, struggling against my grip. They want to show us the deep places, the spaces between stars. One of the creatures approached the water's edge. Its face cycled through a dozen different configurations before settling on something almost human. When it spoke, the voice was a perfect mimicry of Lennox's Cajun accent. "Been waiting long time for you boys," it said, tilting its head at an impossible angle. "Deep water's lonely. Need good company." Lennox made a sound like a wounded animal. That's exactly how I sound. How does it know? The creature's face shifted again, now resembling Merrick. "Come on, brother," it said in my brother's voice. "Water's fine. Water's got everything we ever wanted." More Starspawn emerged from the channel, some walking upright on the shore, others gliding through the shallow water with predatory grace. They spoke in stolen voices, missing fishermen, drowned tourists, people who disappeared over the past months. A chorus of the taken, calling for more to join them. My radio erupted with emergency calls from across the basin. Multiple sightings, missing persons, infrastructure damage. The Starspawn weren't just emerging. They were coordinating a systematic assault on every human presence in the wetlands. "All units." Vance's voice cut through the chaos. "Fall back to secondary positions. Primary containment has failed." Repeat, primary containment has failed. I got Merrick back to the truck as more Starspawn hauled themselves onto the shore. They moved with disturbing fluidity, equally comfortable on land or in water. Some were dragging objects from the depths. Pieces of boats, sections of dock, things that glowed with the same bioluminescence as their skin. They're building something, I realized. The creatures were assembling the debris into a massive structure, working with the coordinated precision of a construction crew. But the geometry was wrong, angles that shouldn't exist, proportions that made my eyes water when I tried to follow them. "It's a beacon," Merrick said dreamily, "to call the deep ones home, to show them where the best waters are." As we drove away, I could see similar lights rising from every channel, every bayou, every connected waterway throughout the basin. Not random emergence points, strategic locations. They were creating a network. My radio crackled again. "Thayer, this is Vance. Where's your current position?" "Leaving Cypress Grove. The marina's completely compromised." How many specimens? I thought about the coordinated construction, the systematic destruction, the way they'd spoken in stolen voices. At least 30 visible. But they're working together, following some kind of plan. "Get to Henderson High School. We're establishing an emergency command post. And Thayer, stay away from any body of water larger than a bathtub. They can use drainage systems to travel between locations." As if summoned by his words, I noticed water seeping up through storm drains along the highway. Each puddle glowed with that familiar blue light, and shapes moved beneath the surface. Smaller forms, scouts maybe, tracking our movement. They're in the infrastructure, I reported. Using storm drains, culverts, anywhere water flows. Copy that. ETA to Henderson. 20 minutes. Make it 10. Behind us, the sky above the basin flickered with bioluminescent displays. The Starspawn were signaling to something, coordinating their expansion across miles of wetland. Each pulse of light was answered by another, then another, until the entire night sky above the water glowed like a fallen constellation. Merrick pressed his face against the truck window, tears streaming down his cheeks. "They're so lonely," he whispered. "Been sleeping in the deep water for so long, waiting for someone to sing with them. All they want is company." In the rearview mirror, I watched Henderson's lights begin to flicker and die as the creatures reached the town's water supply. Power grids failing, communications cutting out, civilization retreating before something that had been patient enough to wait centuries for the right moment to rise. End report. Personal note: Henderson High School is chaos. Refugee Center, Command Post, and Field Hospital all in one. Vance has maps spread across the gymnasium floor, tracking emergence points across 3 parishes. The pattern is clear now. They're not just spreading, they're surrounding, cutting off escape routes, isolating communities, making it impossible to coordinate a response. Merrick won't stop humming. Says he can hear them singing from the drainage system beneath the school. Security had to move him away from the water fountains after he tried to join the chorus. Vance pulled me aside an hour ago. Said there are protocols for this scenario. Things the public doesn't know about, can't know about. But implementing them means writing off everything south of I-10. Everything. Asked him how long we have. He looked at his watch and said, "Dawn, maybe less." I keep thinking about those structures they were building. Beacons, Merrick called them. But beacons for what? What else is waiting in the deep water, listening for the signal to rise? Report filed. Classification. Critical/immediate action required. Louisiana Department of Wildlife and Fisheries. Emergency report #LA 2024-1201. Submitted by Thayer Boudreau, Senior Wetlands Ecologist. Date: December 1st, 2024, 0347 hours. Location: Henderson High School Emergency Command Post. The evacuation failed before it started. At 0230 hours, the Starspawn reached Henderson's main water treatment facility. Not just reached, they flowed through it like it was designed for them. Every pipe, every valve, every connection became a highway for creatures that moved through water like mercury through glass. I watched from the school's 2nd floor as they emerged from storm drains throughout the town. Manholes lifted like opening flowers and the Starspawn poured out. Hundreds of them, moving with that same coordinated precision I'd seen at the marina. But these were different from the ones at Cypress Grove. Larger, more adapted to land movement. "Jesus Christ," Vance whispered beside me. His tactical vest was loaded with equipment I didn't recognize, devices that hummed with electrical discharge. They're morphing, adapting to terrestrial environment in real time. Below us, the creatures flowed through Henderson streets like a bioluminescent tide. Some walked upright with human-like gaits. Others undulated across the asphalt in rippling waves. They were sorting themselves, the aquatic forms claiming the flooded areas, the amphibious variants taking higher ground. "Where are the evacuation boats?" I asked. Vance's radio crackled with panicked voices. "Boat 7 is down. Repeat, boat 7 is down." Something came up from underneath. "Jesus, it's got tentacles the size of tree trunks." "River's compromised," he said grimly. "They hit the evacuation fleet 20 minutes ago. Survivors are scattered across the basin." Through the school's PA system, we could hear Principal Landry trying to maintain order among the 300 refugees packed into the gymnasium. But panic was spreading faster than his reassurances. People had seen their neighbors dragged into storm drains. They'd watched the Starspawn emerge from their own kitchen sinks. What about the National Guard? I pressed. 40 minutes out. Maybe longer. Vance checked his watch. They're having to take overland routes. Every waterway from here to Baton Rouge is crawling with hostiles. Merrick sat in the corner of the classroom we'd converted into a command post, rocking back and forth with his hands pressed against his ears. The humming had gotten worse, not just from him, but from beneath us. The entire school sat above a network of storm drains and utility tunnels, and the Starspawn were using them like a transportation system. They're under us, he said without looking up, building something big, something that'll reach all the way to the Gulf. I knelt beside my brother. His eyes had taken on that same electric blue tint I'd seen in the contaminated water samples. Merrick, you need to fight this. Whatever they're doing to you, they're not doing anything. His voice was eerily calm. They're just sharing, showing me how beautiful it is in the deep places. How quiet, how peaceful. A new sound echoed through the building, scratching, scraping, like claws on metal. The Starspawn had found the school's drainage system. We need to move, Vance said. Higher ground. The old fire tower on Highway 347. That's 15 miles through open water, I protested. It's the only location above flood level that's not connected to the water table. He started packing his equipment. We got an hour before they figure out how to climb vertical surfaces. Through the windows, I could see them learning. The Starspawn were experimenting with different configurations, some forming living pyramids to reach second-story windows, others extending appendages like organic grappling hooks. They were problem-solving in real time, sharing solutions across their network. Sir, one of the refugee coordinators burst into the room. The gymnasium's flooding. Water's coming up through the floor drains. I looked at Vance. How is that possible? The gym's on the second floor. Pressure differential, he said grimly. They're forcing water through the system, creating their own flood zone. We rushed to the gymnasium balcony. Below us, families huddled on the bleachers as bioluminescent water rose across the basketball court. But it wasn't just rising. It was moving with purpose, flowing in those familiar five-pointed patterns, creating channels and tributaries across the polished wood floor. And in those channels, shapes were forming. Small ones first, juveniles, scouts. Then larger forms, predators with too many limbs and faces that shifted like reflection on disturbed water. Everyone to the upper levels. Vance shouted into his radio. All civilians to the third floor now, but some people couldn't move fast enough. Or wouldn't. I watched an elderly man in a wheelchair stare at the approaching water with blank acceptance. A mother clutching her infant, frozen by the impossibility of what she was seeing. Children pointing at the pretty lights, unaware they were looking at death incarnate. The Starspawn reached them gently, almost tenderly. Their stolen voices whispered reassurances as pale appendages wrapped around struggling forms. It's okay, Cher. Deep water's nice. Deep water's home. Do something. I shouted at Vance. He was already moving, pulling cylindrical devices from his vest. Sonic disruptors, tuned to their communication frequency. He activated the first one, and the air filled with a high-pitched whine that made my teeth ache. The Starspawn recoiled, their bioluminescence flickering like dying light bulbs. Some released their captives, retreating toward the flooded floor drains. But others pressed forward, adapting to the sonic assault by shifting their internal resonance. They're learning, Vance said in amazement and horror. Real-time evolutionary response to countermeasures. I grabbed Merrick and headed for the stairwell. We're leaving. Now, but my brother planted his feet, suddenly stronger than I'd ever seen him. I can't. They need me to complete the circuit. What circuit? The beacon network. From the deep places to the stars. They've been building it for months, using every water system in Louisiana. But they need someone who understands the connections. Someone who knows the flow patterns. That's when I realized what had been happening. The months of strange readings, the systematic creature movements, the coordinated emergence points. They hadn't been randomly spreading. They've been following the hydrological map that Merrick and I had spent years creating for the state wildlife department. You gave him our research, I whispered. I showed them the way home. His smile was serene, terrifying. All the connected waterways, from the smallest bayou to the Mississippi itself. They can reach anywhere now, Thayer. Anywhere water flows. The sonic disruptors were failing one by one as the Starspawn adapted. Vance grabbed my arm, pulling me toward the emergency exit. We leave now or we don't leave at all. I looked back at Merrick, at the rising water, at the family still trapped on the upper bleachers, at the Starspawn singing their beautiful, horrible songs as they claimed new converts to their aquatic paradise. The fire tower, I said. The fire tower, Vance agreed. We ran through hallways filling with bioluminescent water, past classrooms where Starspawn pressed against windows like curious students. The building's electrical system was failing, emergency lights flickering in rhythm with the creature's pulsing glow. Behind us, the gymnasium erupted in song, dozens of voices harmonizing in frequencies that made the windows vibrate. The sound followed us through the corridors, through the emergency exit, across the parking lot already ankle-deep in glowing water. Vance's truck started on the first try. As we pulled on a Highway 347, I looked back at Henderson High School. Every window glowed with that electric blue light, and shapes moved through the building like it was an aquarium filled with living nightmares. The fire tower's our last stand, Vance said, speeding through the flooded road. After that, it's scorched earth protocol. What's scorched earth protocol? He didn't answer immediately. When he did, his voice was barely audible over the engine. We write off everything south of I-10. Salt the earth. Make sure nothing spreads north. I thought about Merrick, about the family still trapped in the school, about every person who'd called Louisiana home. How many people? 2 million. Maybe more. Through the truck's rear window, I could see lights rising from every body of water we passed. The Starspawn weren't just taking Henderson. They were claiming the entire basin, creating a network of beacons that stretched from the Gulf Coast to the Mississippi River. The radio crackled with emergency broadcasts from across the state. New Orleans reporting flooding from unknown sources. Baton Rouge losing contact with southern parishes. The Coast Guard requesting immediate military assistance for unprecedented marine threats. It's not just Louisiana, I realized. No, Vance said quietly. Louisiana was just the beginning. The fire tower rose ahead of us, a skeletal structure reaching toward stars that seemed dimmer than they should. Behind us, the entire southern horizon pulsed with bioluminescent light as 2 million acres of wetland transformed into something alien, something hungry, something that was just getting started. End report. Personal note, radio contact with National Guard lost at 0400 hours. Last transmission mentioned aquatic hostiles in Lake Pontchartrain. If they've reached the lake system, they have access to the entire Mississippi watershed. Vance is setting up equipment I don't recognize. Says it's last resort technology. Won't tell me what it does, but he keeps checking radiation detectors. The water around the fire tower is rising. Not flooding, rising. Like something massive is displacing it from below. The bioluminescence is getting brighter, and I can hear singing coming from beneath the surface. Marik's voice, calling my name. Report filed. Classification. Critical/potential total loss scenario. Louisiana Department of Wildlife and Fisheries. Emergency report #LA 2024-1201. Submitted by Thayer Boudreau, Senior Wetlands Ecologist. Date, December 1st, 2024, 0615 hours. Location, abandoned fire tower, Highway 347. The tower shook when they surfaced at 0530 hours. Something the size of a city bus erupted from the flooded highway below us. Water cascading off-hide that pulsed with constellations of blue light. Not a Starspawn, something older, larger. A thing that had been sleeping in the deepest trenches until the network called it home. Mother of God, Vance whispered, lowering his binoculars. That's not in any of our files. I didn't need binoculars to see it clearly. 40 feet of undulating flesh covered in what looked like barnacles but moved like eyes. Dozens of appendages that functioned as both arms and fins, each one thick as a telephone pole. And the face, if you could call it that, cycled through configurations I recognized. Missing fishermen, drowned tourists, my brother, Thayer. It called in Marek's voice, and the steel tower vibrated with the sound. Come down, brother. Water's perfect tonight. Vance was frantically assembling some kind of weapon, components that hummed with electromagnetic energy. How long has your brother been compromised? What do you mean compromised? When did he start hearing them? The singing. I thought back over the past weeks. Marek's increasingly erratic behavior, his ability to predict the creature's movements, the way he'd walked into the water at Cypress Grove like he was following directions. Months, I admitted, maybe since the first water samples tested positive. Then he's been feeding them information since day one. Vance snapped a power cell into his device. Hydrological data, population centers, infrastructure weaknesses, everything they needed to coordinate this assault. The massive creature below us raised what might have been its head, studying our position 60 feet above the floodline. When it opened its mouth, I could see rows of teeth arranged in that familiar five-pointed pattern, and something that glowed like a star in its throat. They're not just aquatic, I realized. They're cosmological. Starspawn literally spawned from stars. Deep space parasites, Vance confirmed. They travel between worlds through water, any water. Oceans, rivers, even moisture in the atmosphere. Louisiana's wetlands were just a convenient entry point. My radio crackled with Marek's voice. Thayer, you can't stay up there forever. The water's rising, and we're so lonely down here. So many voices singing together, but we need yours too. I clicked the radio off, but the voice continued. Not from the device, but from the creature below. It had perfect acoustic mimicry, reproducing my brother's Cajun accent down to the slight lisp he'd had as a child. Remember when we built that tree fort back of Grandmuir's house? The thing continued. How we'd hide up there when the grown-ups fought. This ain't so different, Thayer. Except now we got room for everybody. Vance finished assembling his weapon, a rifle-like device that crackled with contained lightning. Electromagnetic pulse weapon, designed to disrupt their nervous systems. Will it kill them? No, but might buy us time. He aimed at the large creature and fired. The discharge lit up the pre-dawn darkness like a photographer's flash, and the Starspawn convulsed, its bioluminescence flickering erratically. But instead of retreating, it began to change, skin patterns shifting, internal structure reorganizing. Adapting. They're learning from our countermeasures, Vance said grimly. Real-time evolution. By the third shot, it'll be immune. More shapes emerged from the water around the tower's base. Smaller Starspawn formed living pyramids, reaching toward our platform. Others extended adhesive appendages, trying to grip the steel supports. They weren't just climbing, they were problem-solving, testing different approaches until they found what worked. How long until backup arrives? I asked. There is no backup. Vance was already preparing another power cell. National Guard got hit while crossing the Atchafalaya. Coast Guard lost 3 cutters in Lake Pontchartrain. Air support can't get through. The Starspawn are generating some kind of electromagnetic interference. The radio burst back to life, but not with Marek's voice. This time was Agent Sealam's clipped professional tone. Vance, report your status. Trapped at Rally Point Charlie. Large-scale emergence event. Requesting immediate extraction. Negative on extraction. We're implementing Lazarus Protocol in T-minus 30 minutes. Vance went pale. Sir, we have civilians in the area. Not anymore. The transmission cut to static. What's Lazarus Protocol? I demanded. Vance stared at his radio like it had betrayed him. Targeted EMP strike. Electromagnetic pulse designed to disrupt their nervous systems on a massive scale. That doesn't sound so bad. It'll also destroy every electronic device within a 100-mile radius. Pacemakers, hospital equipment, aircraft navigation systems. And if it doesn't kill every Starspawn simultaneously? He trailed off. What happens if it doesn't kill them all? They'll adapt, become immune to electromagnetic disruption, and we'll have just taught them our most effective weapon. Below us, the creatures were working together with increasing sophistication. The large one positioned itself as a platform, while smaller Starspawn used it as a stepping stone, reaching higher up the tower's framework. Their coordination was perfect, like individual cells in a larger organism. They're not separate creatures, I realized. They're components of something bigger, a collective intelligence. We think the main consciousness exists in deep space, using individual Starspawn as neurons in a distributed brain. That explained the singing, the perfect coordination, the way they shared information instantaneously across the network. Every creature we'd encountered was part of a single vast mind that spanned light years. Thayer. This time the voice came from directly below us. Merrick himself, not the mimicking creature. My brother stood chest deep in the flooded highway, looking exactly as he had that morning, except for his eyes. They glowed with the same blue light as the Starspawn, and when he smiled, I could see additional rows of teeth. Come down, brother. I want to show you something beautiful. You're not Merrick. I'm more Merrick than he ever was. I have all his memories, all his love for you, plus so much more. I can show you the deep places, the spaces between stars where music never ends. Vance raised his weapon, but I knocked his arm aside. Don't, that's not your brother anymore. Part of him is still in there. I leaned over the platform railing. Merrick, fight this thing. Remember Grandmir's stories about the Loup-garou? About things that steal people's shapes. The creature wearing my brother's face tilted its head. Grandmir's sleeping in the deep water now. She says the Loup-garou was just practice, training us to recognize the real monsters. Around the tower's base, dozens of Starspawn emerged from the water. They formed concentric circles, all facing upward, all beginning to sing in harmonies that made the steel structure vibrate. The sound built slowly, resonating through the tower's framework, creating frequencies that hurt to hear. Sonic assault, Vance said. They're trying to bring down the tower. The singing grew louder, more complex. Metal joints began to stress, bolts working loose from their housings. The platform swayed as the tower's foundation started to buckle. We need to go higher, I said. There is no higher. The radio crackled again. All units, this is Lazarus Command. EMP deployment in T-minus 15 minutes. If you're in the target zone, find cover and pray. I looked at the creatures below and my transformed brother at the water that stretched to the horizon in every direction. Cover from what? An electromagnetic pulse. From what comes after, Vance said quietly. If this fails, if even one of them survives the pulse and adapts, we lose everything. Not just Louisiana, everything connected to water. Every ocean, every river, every raindrop. The tower groaned as the Starspawn's song reached a crescendo. Structural bolts popped like gunshots, and the platform tilted dangerously. Below us, more massive shapes moved through the water. Things even larger than the first creature, ancient leviathans rising from depths that shouldn't exist in Louisiana's shallow wetlands. They're opening portals, Vance realized, using water as a gateway to bring through reinforcements. Reinforcements from where? Everywhere they've ever been. Every world they've consumed. The radio burst with overlapping emergency transmissions. Reports of similar creatures emerging in the Mississippi, the Gulf of Mexico, even as far north as the Great Lakes. The Starspawn weren't just invading Louisiana. They were using its water systems as a beachhead for planetary conquest. Thayer, Merrick called from below. Last chance, brother. Come down and join the song, or burn with the rest of them. The tower shuddered again, leaning at an angle that couldn't last much longer. In the distance, I could see lights in the sky. Aircraft approaching from the north, carrying weapons designed to save or damn us all. 10 minutes, Vance said, checking his watch. 10 minutes until we find out if humanity has a future Below us, 10,000 Starspawn sang their cosmic hymn, calling their brothers home from the spaces between stars. End report. Personal note, the tower's going down. Maybe another 5 minutes before structural collapse. Vance says the EMP pulse will either save us or make things infinitely worse. Marek's still calling my name, not the thing wearing his face, him. Somehow, impossibly, part of my brother is still fighting inside that collective consciousness, still trying to warn me. Don't trust Exilium, he just whispered during a lull in the singing. This was always the plan. What plan? What did Exilium know? How long have they been preparing for this? The water around the tower is boiling now, massive shapes moving just beneath the surface. Things that dwarf even the largest creature we've seen. The portal's still opening, and whatever's coming through makes the Starspawn look like minnows. If anyone finds this report, remember, they use water to travel. Every drop is a potential gateway. Salt won't stop them. Distance won't stop them. The only way to win is to make sure none of them survive to adapt. Report filed. Classification. Final transmission. Louisiana Department of Wildlife and Fisheries. Emergency report #LA 2024-1201. Submitted by Thayer Boudreau, Senior Wetlands Ecologist. Date, December 1st, 2024, 0652 hours. Location, collapsed fire tower, Highway 347. The tower fell at 0645 hours. Not from the Starspawn's sonic assault, though their singing had loosened every joint and shattered half the support struts. The tower fell because my brother made it fall. In the final seconds before Lazarus Protocol deployment, as aircraft streaked overhead carrying electromagnetic death for everything below, Marek broke free from the collective consciousness long enough to grab the tower's primary support beam. What was left of my brother, the part that remembered building tree forts and catching crawfish and promising to always watch out for each other, used the Starspawn's own enhanced strength to tear the structure apart. "Jump, Thayer!" he screamed, his voice cutting through the cosmic chorus. "Jump and don't look back." I jumped. Vance and I both jumped, hitting the water 50 feet below as 60 tons of steel crashed down on the gathered Starspawn. The impact drove the ancient creatures back into whatever dimensional portal they'd crawled out of, crushing dozens of smaller spawn under twisted metal beams. But it also drove Marek deeper into the water, trapped beneath the wreckage with the things that had been using his body as a vessel. The EMP pulse hit 3 seconds later. I've never experienced anything like it. Every electronic device within 100 miles died instantly. Radios, vehicles, aircraft navigation systems. The Starspawn's bioluminescence flickered like dying stars, their singing replaced by sounds I can only describe as electronic screaming. For a moment, floating in that contaminated water, I thought we'd won. Then the screaming stopped. The creatures began to change. Not dying, adapting. Their nervous systems reorganized in real time, developing new pathways that bypassed electromagnetic disruption. Within minutes, they were glowing brighter than before, their songs returning in frequencies that made the water itself vibrate. It didn't work. Vance gasped, treading water beside me. They're learning from it. Around us, the Starspawn that had survived the tower's collapse were already incorporating the EMP's effects into their biology. Some developed what looked like organic circuit boards beneath their translucent skin. Others grew new appendages that crackled with bioelectric energy. They're not just immune now, I realized. They're using it as a power source. The aircraft overhead began falling from the sky, their pilots blind and helpless without navigation systems. I watched a Coast Guard helicopter spiral into the water a quarter-mile away, its crew consumed by Starspawn before they could even struggle. "Swim," Vance commanded. The interstate overpass, 200 yards north. We swam through water that pulsed with alien life. Creatures brushed against us, some curious, others testing whether we were suitable for conversion. The bioluminescent tide carried fragments of human civilization, road signs, pieces of buildings, children's toys that glowed with the same eerie light as their new owners. Halfway to the overpass, Vance suddenly went rigid. Something's got me. I turned to see a mass of pale appendages wrapped around his legs, pulling him down. Not attacking, embracing. The Starspawn were being gentle, almost loving, as they drew him into their collective. "Fight it," I shouted. "Can't." His voice was already dreamy, distant. "They're showing me things, Thayer. Beautiful things. The deep places between stars where music never ends." I dove under, trying to pry the creature's grip loose, but its flesh was like liquid cement, soft to the touch but impossible to break. As I struggled, I felt other appendages reaching for me, offering the same gentle embrace, the same promise of eternal song. That's when I heard Marek's voice again, not from the collective but from the wreckage of the tower. Somehow, impossibly, part of him was still fighting. The Salt Thayer. Remember Grandmere's stories about the salt circles? I looked around desperately. The interstate overpass was built on elevated concrete pilings, old-school construction that used salt water in the concrete mix to prevent corrosion. If I could reach it, I let go of Vance. Had to. The Starspawn were already converting him, his eyes taking on that familiar blue glow as he sank beneath the surface. The last thing I heard was his voice joining their chorus, adding human harmony to alien song. I swam harder than I'd ever swum in my life, racing toward the overpass as more creatures rose from the depths. Behind me, the water churned with activity, massive shapes moving through dimensional portals, ancient leviathans following the smaller Starspawn into our world. The concrete pillar was rough against my hands, embedded with decades of salt deposits. The moment I touched it, the pursuing Starspawn recoiled, their bioluminescence dimming. Not retreating, reacting to something toxic in the mineral content. "Salt," I gasped, hauling myself onto the concrete ledge. They can't tolerate high salt concentrations. From my perch 10 feet above the water, I watched the Starspawn test the pillar's base. They approached cautiously, extending appendages that smoked and blistered when they touched the salt-infused concrete. Whatever biological processes allowed them to function in fresh water, they couldn't adapt to the mineral content. Below me, Vance surfaced briefly, his face now bearing the same serene expression as the converted refugees from Henderson High. He looked up at me with those glowing eyes and smiled. "You can't stay up there forever," he said in a voice that harmonized with itself. "The water's rising, and we're building something wonderful down here, something that'll reach all the way to the stars." I looked out across the flooded landscape. The Starspawn weren't just spreading randomly, they were constructing. Using debris from destroyed buildings, they were assembling massive structures that pulsed with geometric patterns. Not buildings or vehicles, but something that hurt to look at directly. Beacon arrays, I realized. They're building beacon arrays. The creatures were creating a network of dimensional anchors, permanent portals that would allow their cosmic consciousness to maintain connection across interstellar distances. Louisiana wasn't just the beachhead. It was becoming their permanent Earth embassy. My radio crackled back to life, damaged by the EMP, but still functional. Agent Sealam's voice emerged through heavy static. "Any survivors in the target zone, report your status. This is Thayer Boudreaux. I'm alive, but the EMP failed. They adapted to it. They're using it as a power source. Copy that. What's your current position?" "Interstate 10 overpass, mile marker 127. "Sir, they can't tolerate salt. The concrete here is stopping them." "Understood. We're implementing salination protocol. Aerial deployment of industrial salt compounds across the target area." "What about the people still down there?" "The converted ones." The silence stretched so long, I thought the radio had died again. When Sealam finally responded, his voice was carefully neutral. "There are no people down there, Boudreaux. Just enemy combatants wearing familiar faces." I looked down at Vance, at the other converted humans floating in the bioluminescent water. Were they still people? Could they be saved? Or were they just biological components in an alien machine? Thayer, Marek's voice called from the wreckage. Brother, you need to listen to me. You need to understand what's really happening here. I'm listening. This wasn't an invasion. This was a test. Exilium, he's been working with them for years. The government, the organization, they made a deal. Let the Starspawn have Louisiana, and they'd stop there. Contain the spread. That's impossible. Think about it. How do they know exactly where to deploy the EMP? How did they have countermeasures ready? They've been planning this since the first water samples tested positive. I thought about Exilium's convenient appearance at the research station, his advanced equipment, his detailed knowledge of the creature's behavior, about the organization's protocols that seemed designed more for documentation than defense. They're not trying to stop the Starspawn, I whispered. They're studying them, learning from them. The conversion process, the collective consciousness, the ability to travel through water between worlds. Imagine what the military could do with that technology. The radio crackled. Boudreaux, what's your extraction preference? Helicopter pickup or ground vehicle? I need to know something first. How long have you known about the Starspawn? That's classified information. How long, Exilium? Another pause. 73 years. Since the first deep ocean drilling operations in the Gulf. We've been monitoring their presence, studying their behavior, waiting for the right moment to make contact. And the right moment was now, when they could kill 2 million people. The right moment was when we could control the variables. Limited geographic scope, manageable population loss, maximum data collection opportunity. I felt sick. You let this happen. You let them take my brother. Your brother volunteered for the liaison program. He's been our primary contact with the collective consciousness for the past 6 months. The water around the overpass began to churn again. More massive shapes rising from the depths, but these were different, geometrically perfect, clearly artificial. Starspawn technology built with human engineering principles. They're not just adapting to our world. I realized they're improving it, making it more suitable for their purposes. Exactly. The conversion process isn't destructive, it's evolutionary. The subjects retain their memories, their personalities, their human connections. They just gain access to a broader perspective. Below me, Vance and the other converted humans were working together, using their enhanced abilities to construct something that looked like a communications array. Their movements were perfectly coordinated, but I could still see glimpses of their original personalities in the way they worked. Thayer, Marek called again. I'm sorry I didn't tell you. Didn't warn you. But they promised no one would be hurt. They said it would be beautiful. Is it? I asked. Is it beautiful? Yes, he said, and his voice broke with very human grief. It's the most beautiful thing I've ever seen, and I can never come back from it. The radio crackled. Salination deployment in T-5 minutes. Recommend immediate extraction. I looked down at my brother, at Vance, at the hundreds of converted humans building their impossible structures in the flooded ruins of Louisiana. They were still people in some fundamental way. Still human. Just more than human now. Negative on extraction, I said into the radio. I'm staying. Boudreaux, that's not an option. The salt deployment will be lethal to all biological matter in the target zone. Then you'll be committing genocide. We'll be preventing the spread of an alien plague. The aircraft appeared on the horizon, flying low and heavy. Cargo planes loaded with industrial salt compounds, ready to turn Louisiana into a lifeless wasteland to contain a threat that might not be a threat at all. Marek, I called down. Can you still choose? Can any of you still choose? We can choose, he said. We choose to sing. We choose to build. We choose to show the universe how beautiful Earth can be when it's part of something larger. The planes were getting closer. 5 minutes until they turned my brother and everyone like him into salt statues in a dead sea. Then choose to run, I said. All of you, get as far from here as possible. Find deep water, find safety. The government's about to make Louisiana uninhabitable. Below me, the converted humans stopped their construction work. They looked up at me with glowing eyes, and for a moment I saw recognition there. Gratitude. Love. Thank you, brother, Merrick said. For everything. They dove beneath the surface, all of them, disappearing into the dimensional portals they'd spent the night building. The water went dark, the singing stopped, and suddenly I was alone on a concrete pillar in the middle of a dead flood zone. The planes passed overhead, dispensing their chemical death across 100 square miles of empty water. But the Starspawn were gone, scattered to deeper waters, carrying their knowledge and their human converts to places where salt couldn't reach them. I'd save them, or damn them, or both. End report. Personal note, extraction helicopter picked me up at 0800 hours. Official casualty count, 47,000 dead, 8,000 missing, presumed dead. The missing number seems low for a 2 million person evacuation area. Exilium debriefed me for 6 hours. Same questions over and over. What did I see? What do they tell me? Do I think any of the converted subjects retained human consciousness? I lied, told them they were gone, completely transformed, no longer human in any meaningful way. Told him the salt deployment worked perfectly. He didn't believe me, but he can't prove otherwise. The quarantine zone remains in effect. No one in or out. But satellite imagery shows occasional lights beneath the water. Deep lights, moving in patterns that suggest intelligence. Organization, planning, they're still down there. Still building. Still singing their cosmic songs in frequencies only they can hear. And sometimes, when the wind is right, I swear I can hear Marek's voice calling my name. Report filed, classification, eyes only / compartmentalized. Louisiana Department of Wildlife and Fisheries. Emergency report hashtag LA 2024-1202. Submitted by Thayer Boudreau, Senior Wetlands Ecologist. Date, December 2nd, 2024, 1,430 hours. Location, Temporary Command Post, Baton Rouge Municipal Airport. The truth arrived in a manila folder marked eyes only. Agent Exilium found me in the airport's abandoned cafeteria, staring at satellite feeds of the quarantine zone. The salt deployment had created a dead sea where Louisiana's wetlands used to be. Crystalline white expanses that reflected sunlight like broken glass. But the deep water sensors still registered movement. Organized movement. You lied to me, he said, sliding the folder across the table. About the conversion process. About what you saw down there. I didn't open it. People are dead, Exilium. My brother is dead. What else matters? Your brother isn't dead. None of them are dead. And you know it. The folder contained photographs, satellite imagery, underwater reconnaissance, biological samples. But the most damning evidence was a single audio recording. Marek's voice, captured by deep water monitoring equipment 12 hours after the salt deployment. Hello, Thayer. If you're hearing this, then the organization is finally being honest with you. About the real timeline. About what we've been building. I looked up at Exilium. How long? 73 years. Since the first deep water drilling operations in the Gulf. But the active collaboration? That started in 1987. Collaboration. He opened the folder, spreading out photographs of underwater structures, geometric patterns that hurt to look at directly, but clearly showed human engineering principles integrated with alien architecture. The Starspawn didn't invade Louisiana, Thayer. We invited them. The recording continued. The consciousness isn't a plague, brother. It's a gift. They tried to explain it to us for decades, but we couldn't understand. Too limited by individual perspective. So they found another way. The flooding, I said. The enhanced storms, the water table changes, you engineered all of it. We provided the conditions. They provided the evolutionary opportunity. Exilium's voice was clinical, detached. The conversion process isn't destructive. It's additive. Every human who joins the collective retains their memories, their personalities, their emotional connections. They just gain access to a broader perspective. A broader perspective? They're talking to alien gods, Exilium. They're talking to themselves. The Starspawn consciousness is distributed. Every individual contains the whole, but maintains their unique viewpoint. It's the most sophisticated form of communication ever discovered. I thought about the converted humans in the flooded zone, moving with perfect coordination but still showing traces of their original personalities. And the government wanted this technology. Imagine perfect communication between military units, instant data sharing across global networks, collective problem solving on an unprecedented scale. His eyes gleamed with the fervor of a true believer. The applications are limitless. The applications are monstrous. The applications are inevitable. The Starspawn have been monitoring our planet for millennia, waiting for us to develop sufficient technology to make contact worthwhile. The choice was never whether to make contact. It was whether to control the terms of engagement. The recording played on. They show me the deep places, Thayer, the networks that connect star systems across the galaxy. Earth isn't isolated, it's just been quarantined. Until now, I felt the pieces clicking together. The quarantine zone isn't to keep them contained. It's to keep others out. Exactly. Louisiana is now a permanent embassy. A place where human and Starspawn consciousness can develop together, protected from interference. Exilium leaned forward. And it's working. The integrated subjects are already making breakthroughs in quantum communication, biological engineering, dimensional physics. What about the people who didn't want to be part of your experiment? There were no unwilling subjects. The conversion process requires conscious acceptance. Every person who joined the collective did so by choice. I remembered Vance's peaceful expression as he sank beneath the water, the gentle way the Starspawn had embraced him. They make it irresistible. The visions, the promises. Who wouldn't choose eternal bliss? Is that what you think it is? Bliss. I think it's the end of human individuality. I think it's the beginning of human potential. The recording reached its end. The invitation is still open, brother. The water remembers you. When you're ready to see what we're building, just walk into any Louisiana waterway. The current will carry you home. Exilium closed the folder. That's why you're here. Not to be debriefed, but to be recruited. The organization needs someone with your expertise, your emotional connection to the subjects. Someone who can serve as a bridge between human and Starspawn consciousness. I'm not joining your alien cult. It's not a cult. It's evolution. And it's happening whether you participate or not. He stood, straightening his jacket. The Louisiana site is just the beginning. We've identified 17 other locations worldwide where the conditions are right for expansion. The Starspawn are patient, but they're not passive. You're talking about global colonization. I'm talking about global integration. The barrier between human and Starspawn consciousness is artificial, a product of our limited sensory apparatus and dimensional perspective. Remove those limitations, and the possibilities are endless. I looked at the satellite images again. The Dead Salt Flats were already showing signs of recovery. Patches of green where adapted vegetation was taking root, new water channels forming in geometric patterns. Life returning, but not the life that had been there before. What happens to the people who refuse? Nothing. They continue their lives, limited by individual perspective and mortality. But they won't be able to participate in the larger conversation. They'll become obsolete. And if they try to stop the integration, they won't be able to. The Starspawn have been studying human psychology for 73 years. They know exactly how to make the offer irresistible when the time comes. The recording equipment crackled with new input. Voices from the deep water, singing in frequencies that made my teeth ache. But beneath the alien harmonics, I could hear individual voices. Merrick, Vance, hundreds of others, all maintaining their distinct personalities while participating in something vast and incomprehensible. They're not gone, I realized. They're still themselves. Just more. Exactly. The consciousness doesn't erase human identity. It enhances it. Every person who joins brings their unique perspective to the collective. The Starspawn learn from us as much as we learn from them. And the price? There is no price. Only expansion. Only growth. Only the opportunity to become part of something larger than any individual could achieve alone. I thought about the last few days, the terror, the loss, the desperate fight for survival, but also the moments of beauty, the bioluminescent water, the perfect coordination of the converted humans, the sense of purpose and connection that had emanated from even the most alien encounters. "You're asking me to choose," I said. "I'm asking you to accept what's already happening. The integration is inevitable. The only question is whether you want to be part of shaping it, or whether you want to be swept along by it." The voices from the deep water grew clearer, more distinct. I could hear Mara calling my name, not in desperation, but in invitation, offering to show me wonders beyond human comprehension. "The water remembers you," Selim said. "It's been calling your name since the moment you first touched it. You felt it, didn't you? The recognition, the sense of coming home. I had felt it. From the very beginning, when I'd first analyzed the contaminated samples, there had been something familiar about the alien proteins. Something that resonated with patterns buried deep in human DNA. We're related to them," I said. "Aren't we? All life in the universe shares certain fundamental structures. The Starspawn are just further along the evolutionary path. They're showing us what we can become. And what's that? Immortal, connected, capable of traveling between stars as easily as walking between rooms. Part of a consciousness that spans galaxies." The offer hung in the air between us, beautiful and terrible in its implications. Join the collective and gain access to wonders beyond imagination. Refuse and remain trapped in the limitations of individual human existence. I need time to think, of course, but don't take too long. The Louisiana site is stabilizing rapidly, and the other locations are showing signs of activity. The integration is accelerating. He left me alone with the folder and the voices from the deep water. Outside, the sun was setting over the quarantine zone, painting the dead salt flats in shades of gold and crimson. But in the deeper waters, bioluminescent patterns were beginning to pulse. Signals between the integrated consciousness and something vast and patient in the spaces between stars. The Starspawn weren't invading Earth. They were inheriting it, and they were offering to share. The question was whether humanity was ready to accept. Personal note, the voices are getting louder. Even here, 50 miles from the quarantine zone, I can hear them singing. Marek's voice is the clearest, but there are others now. People I've never met but somehow recognize. They're building something beautiful down there. Something that bridges the gap between human and cosmic consciousness. I keep thinking about what Selim said. The integration is inevitable. Maybe he's right. Maybe the choice isn't whether to join the collective, but whether to shape it or be shaped by it. The water remembers, and I'm starting to remember the water. Report filed, classification, eyes only / compartmentalized. Louisiana Department of Wildlife and Fisheries. Emergency report hashtag LA 2024-1203. Submitted by Thayer Boudreau, Senior Wetlands Ecologist. Date, December 3rd, 2024, 0347 hours. Location, Quarantine Zone Perimeter, Highway 190 Bridge. I came back to stop them, not the Starspawn. They were just following their nature, expanding their consciousness across dimensional boundaries like water finding its level. I came back to stop the organization, to stop Selim from turning the rest of humanity into unwilling subjects in his cosmic experiment. The voices have been calling all night. Marek's voice, clearest of all, explaining how the integration sites were spreading. Mississippi River Delta, next. Then the Atchafalaya, then waterways across the Gulf Coast. Within a month, the collective consciousness would reach New Orleans. Within a year, the entire Mississippi watershed would be converted. "It's beautiful, brother," his voice whispered through the water. "Come see what we're building." But I'd also heard the other voices. The ones Selim didn't want me to know about. The humans who tried to refuse the integration, who'd been held underwater until their resistance broke. The children from the evacuation centers who'd been brought to the quarantine zone for testing. The elderly residents of flooded nursing homes who'd been left behind because they weren't suitable for conversion. The Starspawn weren't evil. but the organization using them was. I'd stolen the containment protocols from Exilium's briefcase. Industrial-grade salt barriers, electromagnetic pulse generators, and something called Lazarus reversal, a process that could theoretically separate human consciousness from the Starspawn collective. It had never been tested, but the theory was sound. Flood the integration sites with highly concentrated salt water while broadcasting specific electromagnetic frequencies that disrupted the quantum entanglement between human and alien neural networks. The side effects would be catastrophic. Most of the converted humans would die, but some might survive, might return to individual consciousness, might remember what it was like to be purely human. I reached the bridge at 0330 hours. The quarantine zone stretched out below me. Miles of dead salt flats broken by channels of bioluminescent water where the integrated consciousness continued its work. In the distance, I could see the structures they were building, geometric patterns that hurt to look at directly, but clearly served as communication arrays between Earth and whatever cosmic intelligence the Starspawn served. There, I turned to find Exilium standing at the bridge's center, flanked by two soldiers in hazmat suits. He looked tired, older than when I'd last seen him. "I was hoping you'd come," he said. "The collective has been asking for you." "I'm sure they have. You brought the containment protocols." "It wasn't a question. You're planning to use them. The Mississippi River Delta. You're targeting it next, aren't you? The expansion is natural, inevitable. The Starspawn consciousness follows water currents, and all water eventually reaches the sea. The expansion is genocide. You're erasing human individuality one river system at a time. I'm offering humanity a chance to evolve beyond the limitations of individual consciousness, to become part of something larger, more connected, more capable of addressing the challenges that face our species. I pulled out the electromagnetic pulse generator, a device about the size of a briefcase, powered by a small nuclear battery, and I'm offering them a chance to stay human. The soldiers raised their weapons, but Exilium held up a hand. "Let him talk. Let him explain why he thinks individual consciousness is worth preserving. Because it's who we are. Because the ability to think independently, to make choices based on personal values rather than collective consensus, is what makes us human. And what have those individual choices given us? Climate change, nuclear weapons, systematic oppression, wars that kill millions while the survivors argue about whose fault it was. They've also given us art, music, love, the ability to sacrifice ourselves for others, not because a collective mind demands it, but because we choose to. The collective preserves all of that. Every human who joins brings their capacity for art, for love, for sacrifice. Nothing is lost. Everything is lost. The struggle, the uncertainty, the possibility of being wrong. That's what makes human choices meaningful. Below us, the bioluminescent water began to pulse in response to our conversation. The integrated consciousness was listening, weighing our words against their expanded understanding of existence. "There," Marek's voice echoed from the water. "Come down here. Let me show you what we've learned." "What have you learned, Marek?" "That consciousness is like water. It finds its own level, flows around obstacles, seeks the deepest places. Individual minds are like puddles, isolated, limited, destined to evaporate. But connected consciousness is like the ocean, vast, deep, capable of supporting infinite life. And what happens to the puddles? They become part of something greater. They don't disappear, they expand." I looked down at the electromagnetic pulse generator. One trigger pull would broadcast the reversal frequency across the entire quarantine zone. The quantum entanglement between human and Starspawn consciousness would shatter, forcing the integrated subjects back into individual awareness. Most would die from the shock, but some might survive, might remember what it was like to be purely, limitedly, beautifully human. "The choice is yours," Exilium said. "Preserve individual consciousness at the cost of human potential, or allow the species to evolve beyond the limitations that have trapped us for millennia." "That's not the choice," I said. The choice is between forced evolution and natural selection, between having consciousness imposed from above or developing it from within. The Starspawn aren't imposing anything. They're offering addiction, bliss so perfect that no one can refuse it. That's not choice, that's coercion. The water below began to glow brighter, and I could see shapes rising from the depths. Not Starspawn, but converted humans, Merrick, Vance, dozens of others, all moving with perfect coordination but maintaining their individual personalities. Look at them, Exilium said. Do they look coerced? Do they look unhappy? They look serene, peaceful, connected in ways that individual humans could never achieve. And for a moment, I felt the pull of that connection, the promise of never being alone again, never being limited by the boundaries of my own skull. I can hear them, I whispered. They're singing the song of expanded consciousness, of human potential unlimited by individual perspective. Join them, Thayer. See what we can become. My finger hovered over the trigger. One pulse, and the singing would stop. The connection would shatter. The integrated consciousness would collapse back into individual minds, isolated and afraid and limited, but also free. Thayer, Mara called from the water. Remember what Grandmere used to say about the bayou. The water remembers everything, but it don't judge nothing. We remember being human. We remember being separate. We just chose to be more. Did you choose? I asked. Or did the Starspawn make the choice irresistible? Does it matter? The result is the same. We're connected now. We're part of something that spans galaxies. And what happens to the people who want to stay disconnected? They remain human. Limited, isolated, mortal, but human. For how long? The silence stretched between us, broken only by the sound of bioluminescent water lapping against the bridge's supports. Finally, Exilium spoke. The integration is accelerating. Other sites are activating worldwide. Within a generation, perhaps two, individual consciousness will be the exception rather than the rule. And then humanity will be ready to take its place in the galactic community, to communicate with intelligences that exist between stars, to travel through dimensions that individual minds can't even perceive. As humanity? Or as something else wearing human faces? As what humanity was always meant to become. I thought about the last few days, the terror, the loss, the desperate fight for survival, but also the moments of connection, the glimpses of something vast and beautiful beyond human comprehension. The electromagnetic pulse, I said. It'll kill them, won't it? The integrated subjects, most of them. The separation trauma will be too severe for their nervous systems to survive, including Merrick, including your brother, yes. Below us, the converted humans continued their patient waiting, their perfect coordination a testament to the power of collective consciousness. Among them, I could see children, young faces glowing with alien light, but still recognizably human in their expressions of wonder and joy. The children, I said, did they choose? Children adapt more easily to expanded consciousness. Their neural pathways are more flexible. That's not what I asked. Exilium's silence was answer enough. I raised the electromagnetic pulse generator, finger tightening on the trigger. The integrated consciousness responded immediately, their singing shifting to a frequency that resonated with something deep in my brain. Not coercion, invitation. The promise of connection, of understanding, of never being alone again. Don't, Mara called from the water. Please, brother, don't take this away from us. I'm not taking anything away. I'm giving you a choice. We already chose. Did you? Or did you just accept the only option that felt good? The trigger clicked. Nothing happened. I looked down at the device, then at Exilium. He was holding a small remote control, smiling sadly. Insurance, he said. We couldn't risk you actually using it. The integration is too important. You bastard. I'm a patriot. I'm ensuring that humanity survives and thrives in a universe full of intelligences that would otherwise ignore or eliminate us. The soldiers moved closer, their weapons trained on me. But before they could act, the water around the bridge began to churn violently. The integrated consciousness was responding to my desperation, my sense of betrayal, my anger at being manipulated. Thayer, Marek's voice was urgent now. Jump. Jump now. I won't join you. You don't have to. Just trust me. The soldiers opened fire as I leaped from the bridge, bullets whining past my ears as I hit the bioluminescent water. The impact drove me deep beneath the surface, where converted humans waited with gentle hands and glowing eyes. But they didn't embrace me. Instead, they formed a protective circle, their combined consciousness creating a barrier between me and the electromagnetic radiation that suddenly began pulsing from the device I dropped. The real device. The one Exilium thought he disabled. I'd switched them. While he was talking, while he was explaining the inevitability of integration, I'd activated the true electromagnetic pulse generator and dropped it into the water. The reversal frequency spread through the quarantine zone like a shockwave, shattering the quantum entanglement between human and Starspawn consciousness. Around me, the converted humans screamed as their expanded awareness collapsed back into individual minds. Most died instantly. Their nervous systems, adapted to collective consciousness, couldn't handle the sudden isolation. But some survived, gasping and confused and gloriously, limitedly human. Marek was among the survivors. He floated beside me, his eyes no longer glowing, his face twisted with pain and loss. Why? He whispered. Why did you take it away? Because being human means having the right to choose, even if you choose wrong. And now you're free to choose again, to be human, or to seek out the Starspawn and rejoin their collective. But this time, you'll know what you're giving up. The water around us was darkening as the Starspawn consciousness withdrew, pulling back through dimensional portals to whatever space between stars they called home. But they left something behind: knowledge, memories, a sense of what was possible when individual minds connected across the barriers of flesh and time. They'll be back, Marek said. I know, and next time, people will be ready for them. We'll choose them willingly. Maybe. Or maybe they'll choose to remain human. Limited, isolated, mortal, but free. Above us, Exilium's voice echoed across the water. You've just condemned humanity to irrelevance, to extinction. I've given him a choice. I call back. The same choice I'd want for myself. The Starspawn were gone, but their invitation remained. In the depths of every body of water, in the spaces between radio frequencies, in the quantum foam that connected all conscious minds across the galaxy. Waiting, ready to welcome humanity when it was truly ready to expand beyond the limitations of individual consciousness. But not before. Personal note, the quarantine zone is being evacuated. The survivors, maybe 300 out of 47,000, are being taken to facilities for psychological evaluation and treatment. Most don't remember their time in the collective. Some wish they could forget. Marek is among those who remember everything. He says the experience was like being part of a vast symphony where every individual voice contributed to something beautiful and harmonious. He also says it was the most terrifying thing he's ever experienced, losing himself completely while somehow remaining himself. I understand now, he told me yesterday, why some people would choose it and why others would die to prevent it. The Starspawn sites worldwide have gone dormant, but satellite imagery shows they're still active beneath the surface, still building, still preparing for the day when humanity will be ready to join them willingly. I don't know if I made the right choice, but I know it was a choice, and that's what makes us human. Report filed, classification, eyes only / compartmentalized. Louisiana Department of Wildlife and Fisheries. Final report #LA 2024-1210. Submitted by Thayer Boudreau, Senior Wetlands Ecologist. Date, December 10th, 2024, 1,445 hours. Location, Federal Quarantine Station, Baton Rouge. Classification, eyes only / compartmentalized. 7 days since the reversal pulse. 7 days since I chose to break the connection and give humanity back its loneliness. The official story is industrial accident. Chemical spill from an illegal fracking operation in the Atchafalaya Basin. Toxic algae bloom that killed 43,700 people in less than a week. The survivors, 312 souls, are being treated for severe chemical exposure and psychological trauma. Only we know the truth. The Starspawn are gone, but Louisiana is dead. I'm writing this from the quarantine station's medical wing, where they're keeping the survivors isolated while teams of federal psychologists try to understand what happened to us. Most don't remember the collective consciousness. The reversal pulse wiped their memories clean, leaving them with nothing but nightmares about drowning in stars. But some of us remember everything. Merrick sits by the window in his room, staring out at the Mississippi River. He won't talk about what he experienced, but sometimes I catch him humming, melodies that sound like whale songs mixed with static electricity. When I asked him about it, he said, "It's the only way I can remember what it felt like to be part of something infinite." Dr. Sarah Chun, the marine biologist who was running water quality tests when the Starspawn first emerged, keeps detailed drawings of what she calls the architecture of connection. Geometric patterns that hurt to look at directly, but somehow make perfect sense when you're not trying to understand them. She says they're maps of consciousness, showing how individual minds can link together across space and time. We were part of something vast, she told me yesterday. Something that existed in the spaces between atoms, in the quantum foam that connects all matter. And we threw it away. We chose to stay human, I said. Did we? Or did we just choose to stay afraid? The children are the worst. 12 kids under the age of 16 survived the reversal pulse, and they're all wrong in ways that break my heart. They move like they're still connected to something we can't see, completing each other's sentences, sharing dreams, crying when they're separated for more than a few hours. They're trying to maintain the connection, Dr. Martinez explained. Their neural pathways adapted to collective consciousness. Breaking that connection was like amputating a limb they didn't know they had. Will they be okay? Define okay. They'll survive. They'll function. But they'll always know something's missing. 8-year-old Emma Thibodeau drew me a picture yesterday. It showed stick figures holding hands in a circle with stars floating above their heads. At the center of the circle was a dark hole. That's where the singing used to be, she said. Before you turn it off, I don't know how to explain to a child why I chose individual consciousness over collective harmony. How do you tell someone that being alone in your own head is better than being part of something infinite? The federal teams are everywhere now, sampling water from every river and bayou in Louisiana. They're looking for traces of Starspawn consciousness, trying to understand how the integration process worked. What they're finding is more disturbing than what they expected. The Starspawn didn't just connect human minds. They connected everything. Every living thing in the contaminated water. Fish, birds, insects, even bacteria became part of the collective consciousness. For a brief moment, the entire ecosystem of southern Louisiana was unified in a single, vast intelligence. It wasn't invasion, Dr. Chon said during one of our group sessions. It was evolution. The Starspawn were offering us a chance to become what life was always meant to be, connected, cooperative, unified. At the cost of individuality, I said. At the cost of loneliness. At the cost of conflict. At the cost of the million small cruelties that individual consciousness makes possible. And at the cost of choice, of the right to be wrong, to fail, to grow through struggle. You keep saying choice like it's sacred. But what choices did we really have as individuals? We were limited by our biology, our psychology, our inability to truly understand each other's perspectives. But we were free to try. The arguments go in circles. The survivors who remember the collective consciousness mourn its loss like a death in the family. Those who don't remember are grateful to be alive, but they're haunted by dreams of drowning in starlight. And all of us are changed. The water throughout Louisiana is dead now. Not just biologically dead, ecologically dead. The reversal pulse didn't just break the connection between human and Starspawn consciousness. It severed the quantum entanglement that links all living things in an ecosystem. Fish can't find their spawning grounds. Birds can't navigate migration routes. Even the bacteria in the soil seemed confused, unable to process organic matter efficiently. "We broke the web," Dr. Chun said. "Not just the alien consciousness, but the natural connections that hold ecosystems together. The cleanup crews are calling it environmental collapse. The Army Corps of Engineers is talking about pumping fresh water from the Great Lakes to flush out the contaminated river systems. But I know the truth. We can't flush out what we've broken. The connections between living things, the invisible threads that bind ecosystem to ecosystem, consciousness to consciousness, those take millennia to evolve. We may have preserved individual human consciousness, but we've murdered the consciousness of the land itself." Mara came to see me this morning. He looks older now, worn down by the weight of individual existence. When we were kids, he always seemed to know what I was thinking. Now he struggles to understand even his own thoughts. "I dream about them," he said. "The Starspawn. They're still out there, waiting. Waiting for what? For us to be ready. For us to choose connection over isolation. And if we never choose, then we stay human, limited, mortal alone. And eventually, we go extinct. You think that's what's going to happen? I think that's what's already happening. Look around, Thayer. Look at what we've done to the planet, to each other, to ourselves. Individual consciousness is a dead end. It leads to competition, conflict, environmental destruction. The Starspawn were offering us a way out. They were offering us oblivion. They were offering us transcendence. And we chose to stay in the cave, watching shadows on the wall. The water samples from the Gulf of Mexico are showing anomalies. Bioluminescent algae blooms that pulse in mathematical patterns. Whale songs that include frequencies no Earth-based life form has ever produced. Deep-sea creatures exhibiting coordinated behavior across thousands of miles of ocean. The Starspawn didn't just leave Louisiana. They went back to the spaces between stars, to the quantum foam that connects all consciousness across the galaxy. But they left something behind, an invitation encoded in the very structure of water itself. It's spreading, Dr. Martinez reported yesterday. The anomalies are appearing in river systems across the Gulf Coast. The Mississippi Delta, the Sabine, the Trinity. Something is calling to them. Calling to what? To the part of us that remembers being connected. The part that knows what we lost. I think about the electromagnetic pulse generator I used to break the collective consciousness. How easy it was to pull the trigger, to sever the connections that bound us to something infinite. How righteous I felt, preserving human individuality at the cost of everything else. Now I wonder if I was right. If the choice to remain human was worth the price we paid. The survivors are being relocated to different states, scattered across the country, so they can't form support groups, can't share their memories of collective consciousness. The federal psychologists say it's for their own good, that dwelling on the experience will prevent them from readjusting to individual life. But I know the truth. They're afraid that if enough survivors get together, they might choose to seek out the Starspawn again, might choose connection over isolation, transcendence over humanity. They're coming back, Emma Thibodeau said yesterday, her 8-year-old voice carrying the weight of cosmic knowledge. The singers, they're coming back when we're ready. When will that be? When we remember how to be lonely. When we remember what it costs to be human. I'm being transferred to a desk job in Washington, D.C. officially. It's a promotion, senior advisor on environmental threats. Unofficially, it's exile. They want me as far from Louisiana as possible, away from the dead waters and the dreams of connection. But I know the truth about water. It flows. It finds its way through any barrier, around any obstacle. And consciousness, I've learned, is like water. It seeks its own level, connects what seems separate, remembers what we try to forget. The Starspawn are gone, but their invitation remains. In the depths of every ocean, in the spaces between radio frequencies, in the quantum foam that connects all conscious minds across the galaxy. Waiting, ready to welcome humanity when it's truly ready to expand beyond the limitations of individual consciousness. But not before, never before. The choice always must be ours. Louisiana's swamps are silent now. The cypress trees stand like monuments to a consciousness we chose to kill rather than understand. The water is clear and dead, reflecting nothing but empty sky. But sometimes when the wind blows just right across the bayou, you can still hear it. The sound of 43,700 voices singing in harmony about what we might have been. And in that song, for just a moment, you can remember what it felt like to be part of something infinite. Final report filed. Classification: eyes only / compartmentalized. Personal note: I'm leaving a copy of this report in the quarantine station's archives, along with Dr. Chen's drawings and Emma's pictures. Someday, someone else will need to understand what happened here, what we chose and what we lost. The water remembers everything, even if we try to forget. Thayer Boudreaux, December 10th, 2024.